it appeared that I had shifted the window to the screen capture, so it was trying to do something there. So anyway, should be back ready to go now. So like I said, I had added this hue saturation layer here, and now and again copy my hillshade into the mask. So go to our hillshade, hit Command A to select all, Command C. Then we will go into our hue saturation mask. So I'm going to hold Option or Alt on a PC. Click in there to get into this white box to make sure I'm on the mask here. And I'm going to paste my hillshade into there. Um, and again, I'm going to invert it, right? I want it to be mostly black. And then I'm going to try to pull out these pieces here now. Okay, so let's make sure we're taking it from the right side. Inverse the image, move the top right anchor to the left so it's in the middle of the histogram. So we're going to move this one over here. Alright, so let's try that out. So again, I'm going to hit, while I'm selected on this inverted terrain mask in the yellow layer, I'm going to hit Command M to bring up my layers, and I'm going to take this top right anchor, right, and move that back into here. Alright. Hit OK. And now that I've adjusted that inversion, I have to inverse it again. So back in here. Now I got this very white image, right? I'm going to hit Command I again. That's going to re-inverse it, right? And now it's all dark except for these illuminated sides, the northwest sides of the hills. All right, and so now if I click back into my hillshade, I'm going to see that yellow only on those sides. And there you can see the difference. So between the yellows and the blues, my hillshade now looks like that, right? Which just has a lot more depth and character than it did before. And this is just, using this just with these masks here. So if you wanted to go in and adjust these colors and you get it to this point, you're like, oh, I want to adjust this color a little bit, you can just double click this box here and that'll allow you to get into this hue saturation menu here. You can fiddle with those colors, right? You can make it orange, you can make it green, whatever. And I forget what we had it at 250, I think. 230. 230. All right. Same thing if you wanted to adjust the yellows, you get in here, just double click the little hue saturation icon there. You start messing with it. If you so choose. All right, so now we have our hillshade nice and dialed in. So let's see what's next. Now we want to add texture. We removed texture earlier. We removed kind of the artifact and the kind of the blocky or the nasty looking pieces of texture, right, and smooth that out. And now we want to add back a smoother, more kind of rugged texture or jaggedness. Not really jaggedness. A smooth contrast, I guess, of texture, but not with some of those kind of like little ugly pieces that existed before. I don't know if that makes sense, but here's what we're going to do. All right, back in here, I'm going to go back to my copy of my hillshade. I'm going to make another copy. This one's going to be called texture. I'm going to move that one up above. There's the difference again. This one's up above the adjustments there. Yeah. Lock that back up. Okay. So now I'm on my hill texture layer here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a mask. I'm going to paste the slope layer into it. Then I'm going to change the opacity to 70% and the blending mode to multiply. And what this should do is this should provide some nice, smooth, definitive texture to this map, right? But not have some of those artifacts and issues that we had before. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm on my texture layer here. I'm going to click this button right down here. The square with the circle through it. This is adding a mask. I'm going to turn all these off for a second and turn on my slope layer. And so this is what we're going to use as a mask, right? And so the areas that are white, that hill shade, those pieces are going to come through, and then the dark is going to mask out. So basically what the slope raster is each pixel goes from white, which means the highest amount of slope, to black, which means flat areas. So Command A, copy that. Then we'll go over here to our texture, hit the Control or the Alt button to click into our mask, paste. Go back to our slope, copy, paste that into our mask, right? So on our hill texture, we have our hill shade with our slope in there. We'll click back at our option here. We get to multiply. And opacity about 65 or so. Right? And then just add some of that definition and add some of that complexity to the terrain, but doesn't have that kind of pixelated look to it, right? If we zoom in closely, you can see how much texture it's adding, but not looking ugly, basically. All right. So that's what our terrain's looking like so far. Looking pretty good, I think. We have our texture, we have our blue colors, and we have our yellows. Let me turn this slope layer off down here. We don't really need that anymore. All right. Next step is we're going to add this tree canopy. And the first thing we want to do is we want to give this a little bit of definition against the background. So there's a function in Photoshop, an effect called bevel and emboss. And bevel essentially drives that layer like downward into the image, and bevel makes it sit up upon the image. And so if you're using objects that cut into the landscape, like water features, rivers, you would use the bevel, and that's going to bury that river like into the texture of your landscape or into the texture of your image. Whereas if you have something that sits upon the land, like trees, right, like a tree canopy, which has a vertical extent above the land, then you can use this emboss technique, right, and that's going to put those trees up above a little bit. So let's check this out. So let's go to our tree canopy. Just bury this solid color in there right now. So tree canopy. Right, so we have a nice forested region of Oregon here. You can fiddle with this color however you want. It just kind of grab something that was distinctive. You can fiddle with this color as you see fit. So what we want to do first is double click in here. We're going to click this little So I've just opened up the effects menu. So if you double click, that's the same thing as this little button down here. Double click effects. I'm going to go to bevel and emboss. Right. And I'm going to change the style to emboss. Right, like I said, bevel is pushing this downward, and emboss is bringing it up. Okay, I want that to be smooth. And then the second thing that I want to do in this effects menu is create a pattern of overlay. And so there's some built-in patterns. You can also find patterns you can load in to Photoshop if you so choose. But what we have, this works pretty well for trees. So if we go to pattern, we click here, we go down to grass, and you should have 3. I have 4 because I added one when I was messing around. If you go to this third grass, these two are the same. So click that, right, and you can see that right now you're getting like kind of this yard look on your map or whatever, which we'll fix. All right, so we added the grass. We want the opacity of that to go to 75%, and we want the scale to be 20. All right, so lighten it up a little bit. And the scale is essentially like how big are these little like grains of grass within our pattern. So we'll put those at 20%. Right, so now you can't tell that they're grains of grass. Now they're just like little green dots, right, which mimics a kind of forest texture. Right, sound good? So now we have these effects, bevel and emboss. We use the emboss, we use this pattern overlay with the grass feature at 20%. And that just gives us a little bit of texture, right? And you can get other patterns. I've found that this one works pretty good for forest. Alright, and now on our tree canopy layer, we'll just go ahead and add our blending mode to 50%, the opacity, and the mode to multiply. Multiply 50%. And now we have a nice textured forest that kind of sits up above, right? Just a little bit of shadow that allows it to sit up above our terrain. It looks quite nice. And like I said, you can fiddle with this green if you want it darker or lighter. I found that with this level of transparency and whatnot, this level green works really well for kind of conifer forests that are around in the northwest. All right, and so the last thing that we want to do, we want to kind of, it's a little pale over here in these white spots. We want to add like kind of an earth tone type of color. It's not really going to affect our peak here because our peak already has the blues and yellows, but this earth tone will just allow for a little bit for these kind of white areas to have a little bit more or a little bit more I don't know, realism, I guess. So let's do that piece. So I added this just white box in here, right? And what we want to do is change the color of that to a more kind of sepia type of color. Oops. So that would be, let's go with this, 250, 240, 210. Let's do that in our RGB here. 250, 240, 210. That's going to produce just a solid color that's like, let's move it up so you can see it. That color. Then we're going to grab our tree canopy, our original tree canopy layer, right here. Command A to copy all that, Command C, and then I'm going to go up here and hit Option, open up my mask. I'm going to place it in there. Alright, and it's going to come in because I'm copying a transparent layer that's kind of like a pale color. It's coming in all as this kind of gray here, which isn't very effective. So before you do anything, while it's still selected like this, what you want to do is click over here, just hold Option and click over here in your color, in your solid color. All right, it's going to look like that. And then click one more time back in your layer, in your mask. And now you should be able to move. I don't know why. When you go back and you go back again, go back to the original and back to the mask, it breaks that mask up into two pieces. And turns, there's a black one and a gray one. We can just get rid of the gray one. Now we have a binary mask, right? Black and white. That is going to mask out completely all of the tree canopy area, and then all of the non-tree area is going to allow it to come through. And this is just going to give our places that, mostly the flat places that we haven't really messed with too much, right? Which are these roads, the town, Mount Hood, which is right here, etc. To give those a little bit of characteristic. So click back into our thing, right? We can see what we have there. If we get rid of this, you can see how it's masked out. Okay, don't need that obviously. Right, and you can see now, right? There's just this like, everything else is transparent. This is a good illustration of what the mask does. Right, we can see the hillshade and the terrain and everything come through these places, right? That the mask, or that are not masked, right? And the places that are masked are completely flat. Right, even though there's texture there. So let's just blend this together and we should be almost ready to call it a day, I think. Yeah, let's change the opacity to 50 and the blending mode to multiply. The standard, and it should be good. Multiply opacity 50. Right, so that doesn't really affect our mountain too much. A little bit, but you know, just give it kind of the same tone. But down here it provides a nice contrast to our more realistic looking whatever realistic looking visualization than just the pale white does. Sorry. So yeah, so now if we look at our map, right, from where we started, right, to where we are now, we have quite a nice base map in which we can, you know, add text. We have it's a nice kind of pale enough and soft enough canvas that you can add text to it very easily. If you were mapping, you know, trails or recreation spaces or even fire like we did last, you know, whatever you're mapping, you have this like really nice canvas in which to kind of place additional information on top of very easily, you know. And so that's what I like about doing this within this program, is that, you know, I could do all this in the Photoshop aspect, and then if I was doing similar stuff in Adobe Illustrator, then I could merge those together very, very easily. Okay. And then the final piece, I had this ice layer that I've been trying to mess with for, I don't even know how long, since last year, I guess, when I first made this map. I've never quite figured out. I'll show you what I have thus far, and you're free to just kind of remove this or to kind of play with it in a different way if you want. Um, yeah, again, I'm going to try this emboss because it's going to sit up on top, and I'm going to try an inner shadow little feature. So emboss. Emboss, smooth, and then inner shadow, I think. Yeah. Alright, and so that maybe gives it kind of an icier look to it. And then if I change the blending mode to vivid light. That doesn't look like it was supposed to be. I think I have too many shadows on. Yeah, then vivid light, I think. That doesn't look right either. Like I said, I've never really been able to figure this out. I know it will look good one day. If I can figure out how to make this ice like sit on there quite right. You know, let's just ignore it. Let's just say trash can. All right, that looks better. So there you go. You know, that's how you can take your right DEM and your tree canopy layer and blend them all together with a couple other features to, you know, bring out the shadows and mask various aspects. How you can use all those, build it up to create a nice looking base map and terrain map that is going to be very versatile and meet pretty much all of your mapping needs. Alright, I guess that's the end of my long set of videos. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.